Right, we need to talk about Daryl Dixon. He's probably the most lovable redneck hunter motorcycle enthusiast in the entire apocalypse and is adored by many fans. Like, really adored, to the point where I'm starting to question, has Daryl Dixon become overrated? Okay, all of you diehard Daryl fans, please delete your hateful comments and put your pitchforks away and at least hear me out on this one. In today's video, I wanted to delve into the fan favourite character that is Daryl Dixon and find out whether he has become overrated. Now, obviously this is just my opinion, so don't cook me too much in the comments and let's get straight into the video. Now, who doesn't love an underdog story? Whether it's sports or TV, it just hits different. And Daryl's story is no exception. In fact, he is without a doubt one of the most iconic characters in TV media probably ever. And his transformation from being a rough and ready redneck into a caring and loyal part of our survivors' post-apocalyptic family is incredibly moving. But whilst Daryl had compelling arcs in the earlier seasons of the show, his character development slows dramatically in the later seasons. He often reverts to being this stoic and emotionally closed off character, and I mean, how many times have we seen the writers recycle the same storyline? It goes a little something like this. Person meets Daryl. Daryl's closed off and acts like he doesn't care about them, then proceeds to save them in some manner, often putting his own life on the line to do so, demonstrating how he does in fact care immensely about said person. And this is fine, because I get it, that's Daryl's personality, but we don't need to be shown this hundreds of times. I mean, we see it with Glenn, Carol, Beth, Rosita, Denise, Lydia, Henry, and the list goes on and on. Like, Daryl, we get it, you're too cool to show your emotions, but come on man, we don't need to see this every single time a new character is introduced to the show, or when the writers try and show us how Daryl would interact with other characters. My point is, this loner storyline became so overused and predictable, and Daryl's character probably deserved more towards the end of the show. Also, despite being in the spotlight a hell of a lot, Daryl's personal storylines like his relationship with Carol or Connie and his backstory were never really explored deeply enough in my opinion. Now again, I know there are brief moments in the show with Beth and Carol where he does go into some sort of depth about his backstory, but it's just not enough for me, and this left me feeling sometimes he was underutilised despite his vast amounts of screen time. And don't get me wrong, Daryl as a side character was awesome. In fact, I've made a video on this very channel talking about the brilliance of his character. See, I'm not a Daryl hater. But this kind of emotional depth and fleshed out backstory really needs to be explained, especially when he basically becomes the main character of the show in Rick's absence. Which leads nicely onto my next point. In earlier seasons, Daryl thrived as a foil to Rick, becoming his right-hand man and forming complex relationships with the other survivors, which allowed him to shine without dominating the narrative. And the way the character's written make him almost a perfect complement to the more outspoken and visibly vulnerable character that is Rick Grimes. Arguably some of Daryl's most memorable moments, such as searching for Sophia, bonding with Beth and grieving over Merle and Glenn, often happened in the background of larger storylines. These quieter arcs made him stand out without needing to carry the entire narrative, as Daryl is a character of action rather than words, and his effectiveness comes from what he does rather than what he says. And as a side character, this is perfect. However, when thrusted into that main character role in the absence of Rick Grimes, it just felt like something was missing. With Rick, he was motivated by his family, which impacted every single decision he made. Rick also had the lives of other survivors in his hands, as he fully embraced that leadership role. But Daryl is such a solitary person, he has no direct family, and he isn't trying to build this better world that Rick was trying to build. Daryl was just trying to survive. Now obviously he cares immensely about characters such as Carol, Rick and Glenn, but it's just not the same. His character is way better suited for selective focus rather than being the centerpiece of a story. As a lead, Daryl's reserved and solitary personality didn't evolve enough to sustain the show's highly emotional and complex tone that was set from Andrew Lincoln as Rick Grimes. And obviously this is no fault of Norman Reedus's, he is a phenomenal actor and is superb in this role, but Daryl just doesn't have the desire to lead the group in the same way that Rick did. And I think Norman's held back by the material from expressing the same emotional range that Andrew Lincoln demonstrated. I mean, it's no secret that after the episode What Comes After, where Rick Grimes leaves the show, the viewership numbers head on a straight down trajectory. Because Rick Grimes was the heart and soul of The Walking Dead. From the very beginning, his journey from sheriff to leader was the driving force of the narrative. Without him, the show lost its emotional and moral compass, and whilst Daryl and Michonne do step up in his absence, it's just not the same. I just think Daryl's character, dare I say, is far less engaging and compelling when in this main character role, as he's far better suited for being Rick's insanely cool right-hand man. I want to see Daryl and Rick work together to take down walkers and foes as a team rather than watch Daryl grunt and fix a motorcycle. No joke, there is a whole episode dedicated towards exactly that in season 10. And I know the show was forced to go without Rick Grimes, but in my opinion the show doesn't work without Rick. But I think the show would work the exact same without Daryl. We'd just be losing an insanely cool character. In fact, we know narratively that this is the case because the comics exist. They are living proof. They tell the exact same story, but Daryl is nowhere to be seen. Daryl for me has always been one of those cases of less is more. Part of Daryl's mass appeal is that he's an enigma. He's so unique and unlike any other character in the show. And as you can probably tell by just scrolling down and seeing the copious amounts of death threats I've probably received on this video about suggesting that Daryl could possibly be overrated, he is vastly popular amongst fans. But it's this popularity that I think acts as a curse for him almost, at least in the later seasons. After Daryl becomes the face of the show, he holds everything together, and it makes him seemingly untouchable. He quite frequently emerges from dire situations unscathed, leading to this overwhelming sense of plot armor. Now, I know what you're all saying right now. Rick had the exact same thing, but he didn't really. Like, if you take both characters' biggest plot armor moments, Daryl's are far more unrealistic than Rick's. Yes, there are instances where Rick has survived through plot armor, but let's not forget, in the source material, Rick dies. And I know every single one of you thought Rick was going to die in his last episode, don't even lie to me. As Daryl, on the other hand, has felt invincible since season 4. I guess you could argue about the lineup, but we already kind of knew based on source material and leaks that Glenn and Abraham were going to be the two to die here. So sometimes it feels like Daryl's continued survival is down to his popularity rather than narrative logic. I mean, who can forget the phrase, "If Daryl dies, we riot"? There is such an intense fandom surrounding this character that it's almost hard to argue that he's not overrated. Now, for this video, I enlisted the help of fellow YouTuber Jerry's Take to get another opinion on the subject matter. So let's hear what Jerry has to say.
Honestly, Theo, the answer to whether Daryl is overrated as a character is one that comes with mixed emotions for me. I mean, objectively, the character is overrated and one that I've personally never seen the mass appeal for, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I dislike his character. There's never been a character in all of TV history with greater plot armor than Daryl has, and quite frankly, it's to the point where it kind of me off. Like, look at Daryl Dixon season 2, for instance. There were multiple attempts on Daryl's life where Daryl should have easily been killed, but literally nothing happened to him whatsoever. I'm specifically referring to that one scene where he took out like 20 dudes with guns who were running straight at him when Daryl only had, I think it was like a mace. Stuff like that just straight up grinds my gears, and I can't believe that that's what we've gotten over all of these years for him. But Theo, I also agree that the character doesn't seem to evolve at all. His story just seems to go nowhere, and even when his material in season 7 and 8 get heavy, all he does is grunt like, yeah, like that's it. And sure, he's badass, and sure, his rugged mentality make for fun TV, but I can't really say much else. Like, his existence wouldn't really matter one way or the other. He wasn't critical to the story, which is why he wasn't in the comics. I mean, look, his addition in AMC's TV show is really great. I think it's a testament that so many people love him, and that's cool and all. I just never saw the appeal. I don't know if I ever will see the appeal, even going into the 3rd season of Daryl Dixon, which is a show I do enjoy. Daryl's just never really done it for me personally. I don't hate him, but I don't really love him either, if that makes any sense. Thank you so much for having me on. Back to your section.
I would just like to say a big thank you to Jerry for coming on the channel. He makes amazing content on The Walking Dead and other TV shows, and I can't recommend his channel highly enough. It will be linked at the top of the description, so make sure you go and check him out. And although I am more of a Daryl lover than Jerry, it's hard to argue with his points. So let's wrap things up and jump into the conclusion of whether Daryl Dixon is overrated. So the question of, is Daryl overrated, ultimately comes down to your own opinion. Daryl was a breath of fresh air and one of the first people we saw truly adapt to the apocalypse. It was almost like he preferred this new world to the old one. He had a perfect skill set to adapt to this new world, and it also gave him a fresh start. I think he's quite frankly a brilliant character, who is definitely one of my favourites in the whole show. But that doesn't mean he's not overrated. His overexposure ruined his mystique, and let's face it, he was never written or supposed to be the main character in the show. He's a brilliant side character, but that's about it. His character arc becomes stagnant, and the fan hype surrounding him is just unlike anything I've ever seen before. To the point where on those TikTok character ranking filter things, like 90% of the people I see doing it put Daryl at number 1, which just baffles me. Again, it's quite obviously a matter of opinion, but he's just far less interesting and engaging than Rick for me, and I don't think he's well suited as the main character, and also in the show he often shies away from taking charge and leading our other survivors. But saying all that, I understand the hype. He's unique, insanely cool, and has luscious long hair, but for me, I just can't seem to shake that feeling of Daryl being overrated. So to answer the question I posed at the beginning of this video, the answer is yes, I do think Daryl has become overrated. But with that being said, thank you all for watching today's video, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and please go and check Jerry's channel out, it's honestly amazing. But again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.